Rain hammered Michigan Avenue like shattered glass, turning the streets into rivers that reflected every twisted neon sign and headlight streak. Florina Hayes staggered through the torrent, her designer coat soaked through, and mascara running down her brown cheeks in black rivers. In one hand, she clutched crumpled divorce papers, proof that her husband had spent 8 years betraying her with her best friend, Simone, the woman who had held her trembling hand at her mother's funeral 6 months ago. In the other, a half-empty bottle of Moscato, its sweetness a poor mask for the bitterness roiling in her chest. Her heels slipped on the wet pavement, the world tilted, and she saw her hollow reflection shimmer in a puddle, disappearing beneath the ripples. But she doesn't hit the ground. Strong arms catch her. A taxi screams past. And a deep voice says, "I've got you. You're safe now." Brandon Mitchell. A stranger with storm-gray eyes. And secrets of his own. Because the place he's taking her tonight? It will rewrite everything. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. Florina's eyes fluttered open to the soft wash of morning light, filtering through gauzy lavender curtains. The room smelled faintly of flowers, something sweet and clean that clashed violently with the ache in her chest. Her arm throbbed where an 4-line had been tucked, the cool plastic and tape foreign against her skin. She blinked against the light, the sounds of the city muted beneath the gentle hum of a ceiling fan. Something was off. Not hospital off. Not antiseptic off. This was intentional. Peaceful. Too perfect. Panic rose like bile. Where was she? Who had saved her from the street? A soft knock startled her. The door opened to reveal Brandon Mitchell, carrying a tray with tea, toast, and the smell of buttered bread that made her stomach twist in both gratitude and suspicion. Morning light revealed him fully, tall, well-built, hair dark blonde at the edges of gray, eyes the color of storm clouds just before they break. His navy sweater, expensive but comfortable, hinted at wealth he didn't feel the need to flaunt. He moved carefully, deliberately, every step non-threatening, almost practiced in gentleness. "How are you feeling?" His voice was calm, warm, measured, confused. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse, trembling. "You're at the Mitchell Renewal Center," he said, setting the tray on the small bedside table. "I'm Brandon Mitchell. I run this place." Her brow furrowed. You have medical staff? Who are you?" He perched on the edge of the chair by the window, hands clasped loosely between his knees. His gaze softened, almost guilty. "I'm someone who's been where you are." Florina blinked, incredulous. 3 years ago, he admitted, he had lost his wife and unborn child in a car accident. For an entire year, he had wandered toward the same edge she'd nearly fallen off into the night rain. Drinking, sleeping in strangers' homes, emptying himself out of existence. Recovery hadn't been fast. It hadn't been clean. And then, slowly, he'd built this place. Not a hospital, not a rehab center, but a sanctuary where broken people could remember who they were without judgment. Florina's throat tightened. I can't pay for this." "You don't have to. Stay as long as you need. Heal. Then decide what comes next." Her mind raced, swirling with distrust. She had spent the last 3 weeks learning that promises could be poison, that the men who claimed care and concern often used it as a weapon. Yet there was something in his eyes, something raw, honest, and human, that whispered otherwise. Maybe he understood the particular ache of seeing love become betrayal. Maybe he had lived long enough to hold space for it without judgment. The first week passed in silence and shadows. Florina barely left her room, curling into the bed as if the linen could absorb the pain that no amount of crying had dulled. She slept, woke, replayed Marcus's lies, Simone's smiles and tears, looking for signs she had missed, for hints that would have made it all make sense. She asked herself the questions that had no answers. When did it start? How could she not see it? How many nights of grief had been tainted by deception? Brandon never pushed. Meals arrived 3 times a day, each one left quietly on her tray. Books appeared on her nightstand. Poetry, memoirs of resilience, meditations on grief and survival. Sometimes he sat in the chair by the window, reading while she pretended to sleep, silently observing her like a shadow who meant no harm. She watched him through half-closed eyes, imagining the stories that might be hidden behind that calm expression, wondering if he, too, had survived darkness that had once promised to swallow him whole. Day 8 arrived without fanfare. The sun was soft but insistent, pouring through the windows, urging life forward. Florina, driven by a mixture of curiosity and necessity, ventured from her room, following the gentle trickle of water through the building. Stone paths led her to the rooftop garden, a space both intimate and vast. Lavender beds swayed in the breeze, petals brushing against her fingertips, releasing their calming scent. A fountain murmured in the center, steady and unwavering. The distant hum of the city felt muted, abstract, and far away. Clara, a nurse in her mid-40s with a warm, easy smile, approached as if she'd been expecting Florina all along. "You must be Florina. Brandon said you'd come out when you were ready." Her voice was gentle, full of reassurance. Clara guided her through the center, therapy rooms, group spaces, and a sun-drenched art studio. "Healing happens in community, not isolation," she said softly. "Every corner of this place is built to help people breathe again." Florina hesitated near a bed of lavender, brushing her fingers across the blooms. "He seems like someone who has it all together." Clara's eyes softened, a knowing tilt to her smile. People who look most put together are often holding themselves together by threads. He just learned how to weave those threads into something beautiful. Florina let the breeze wash over her face, letting the scent and softness infiltrate a mind that had been consumed by betrayal and fear. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of calm, a momentary surrender to peace. That garden would become her turning point. She didn't know it yet. Words weren't what healed her, not yet. It would be the quiet persistence of beauty, of human care, of a world that refused to collapse entirely around her, that would remind her she could survive. And beneath the lavender, beneath the fountain's murmur, something fragile stirred, a small, cautious curiosity about the man who had caught her from the storm, and about the life he had built from his own wreckage. Florina wandered the quiet hallways of the center, the soft morning light slanting through tall windows and casting long shadows across the polished floors. A faint strain of jazz floated from somewhere ahead, a saxophone, low and aching, weaving through minor chords that seemed to echo something deep in her chest. She followed the sound, each step tentative, until she reached the end of the corridor. The studio door stood slightly ajar. She paused, hand hovering over the frame, and stepped inside. Brandon was there, motioning with broad, deliberate strokes across a massive canvas. Red and black slashes cut violently across the surface, chaotic and raw, yet beneath the turmoil a structure emerged, a figure reaching, almost pleading, toward something unseen. He hadn't noticed her yet. "Grief therapy," he said without turning, voice calm, almost matter-of-fact. "My therapist made me start painting what I couldn't say out loud." Florina stepped closer, mesmerized. She could see it now, the tension, the strain, the longing in each line. The figure on the canvas seemed suspended between despair and hope. She swallowed, voice trembling. What were you reaching for? Brandon froze. Brush midair. His gaze drifted over the work as if seeing it through new eyes. A future I thought I'd have, he said finally. Then he turned to her. What about you? What did you lose? The question cracked something open inside her. Words tumbled out in a rush, carried by days of unshed tears. My trust. My best friend. 8 years of my life. The family I thought we'd build. Myself. The final word came out raw, ragged, as tears she'd held back for days spilled freely. Brandon didn't offer platitudes. Didn't attempt to fix what had been broken. Instead, he stepped forward, handing her a brush. Then maybe it's time to find her again, he said simply. She hesitated, trembling before the blank canvas he placed in front of her. Her hands shook as they hovered over the paint. She hadn't touched a brush since college, hadn't allowed herself to create since Marcus had told her it wasn't practical. She had given up everything, her art, her dreams, her voice, to be what he wanted. Now, for the first time, she realized she had the chance to reclaim even a fragment of herself. The first strokes were hesitant, dark blues swirling like storm clouds across the canvas. Purples followed, deep and bruised, heavy with grief and anger. Hours slipped by unnoticed as she poured herself into the paint. Brandon occasionally checked in, bringing water or setting a rag nearby, but he said nothing, allowing her silence to carry the weight of her own discovery. The canvas became a mirror of her pain, dark, overwhelming, and necessary. Around the 3rd hour, something shifted. Gold began to seep into the edges, not forced, not deliberate, but rising naturally from her hand as if hope itself had found a way through the storm. She barely noticed the sun climbing higher, the morning giving way to afternoon, her hand moving instinctively as light touched the darkness. For the first time, she realized that creation could be a form of survival, that beauty could emerge from wreckage even when she hadn't invited it. Evening light filtered through the tall studio windows as Brandon returned, standing silently behind her. He studied the canvas, brow furrowed at first in concentration, then softening into appreciation, and finally something deeper, almost reverent. That's remarkable, he said quietly. A long pause followed. Have you ever considered teaching? Florina laughed bitterly, shaking her head. I'm a patient here. I'm the one who needs fixing. He stepped closer, voice firm yet gentle. No. You're someone who survived something that would have destroyed most people. That makes you exactly who they need. Healers aren't people who never got hurt. They're people who learn to turn pain into purpose. She looked at the painting again, seeing not only the storm she had painted but the faint glimmer of possibility breaking through. Perhaps broken didn't mean worthless. Perhaps survival itself was a kind of strength she had forgotten she possessed. That night, sleep came fitfully. Memory clawed its way forward. The day she had discovered Marcus's betrayal 3 weeks ago. She had come home early, hoping for a quiet evening, only to find his phone charging on the counter. The messages from Simone, flirty, intimate, mocking in their casual cruelty, revealed months of lies, hotels, whispered promises, and nights stolen in the guise of work or weekends with the guys. Her mother's funeral, a night meant for mourning, likely shared with the very person who had promised comfort. Confronting Marcus had been a revelation of her worst fears. He didn't deny it. I love her, Flo. I have for 3 years, he had said casually, shifting the blame onto her supposed inattentiveness, her focus on work. Simone had vanished, moving in with him within days. The foundation of her life had cracked, leaving her adrift. Curled into the fetal position on the bed, sobs racking her body, Florina felt something different this time. The crying wasn't drowning her. It was draining poison, expelling the betrayal, the grief, the anger she had carried for weeks. Exhaustion eventually pulled her into sleep, heavier and quieter than any she had experienced in months. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your reality. Everything you thought was true becomes a question mark. But sometimes, in the rubble of your old life, you find pieces of a self you'd forgotten existed. And those pieces, they're stronger than anything you lost. Florina thought she had come to this place to hide from pain. She hadn't known she would come to become someone entirely new, someone her ex-husband would never recognize, someone even she hadn't met yet. 2 months had passed since Florina had first wandered into the rooftop garden, hesitant, fragile, and bruised by betrayal. Now she stood before the mirror in a small office tucked behind the art studio, brow furrowed, hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. Behind her, a whiteboard listed the names of the first 6 participants in her upcoming art therapy class. Sarah, Miguel, Denise, Robert, Karen, James. Ages and struggles varied, yet each name carried weight. What am I doing? She asked herself silently. I'm not a therapist. I'm not even fully healed. What if I make it worse? A knock on the door drew her from spiraling thoughts. Brandon entered, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He immediately understood the tension coiling through her posture. You don't have to be healed to help others heal, he said softly, placing a cup in her hands. You just have to be honest. Her hands shook as he covered them with his own, warm and grounding. Their eyes met and lingered a beat too long, silent acknowledgement of the unspoken tension threading between them. They pulled back simultaneously, both aware of a thing growing neither was ready to name. The circle of participants sat in the studio that morning, a mix of ages, scars, and unspoken stories. The room hummed with quiet anticipation, some faces guarded, others weary. Florina took a deep breath. Her voice shook the first time she spoke. I'm Florina. 3 months ago, I was standing in the rain wanting to disappear. My husband had been cheating with my best friend for years. When I found out, I thought my life was over. She paused, making eye contact with each person, letting the weight of her words sink in. Today, I'm here because someone reminded me that broken doesn't mean worthless. She handed out canvases, brushes, and paints. I want you to paint your pain. Don't pretty it up. Don't make it palatable. Just let it exist. There's no right way to do this, only truth. Hands moved hesitantly at first. Sarah, the widow, covered her canvas in black, staring long and hard at the empty space behind it. Miguel's hand shook as he created jagged red lines, sharp and aggressive like wounds pressed into paper. Denise began with a cage, then slowly drew cracks breaking through the bars. Robert stared at a blank canvas for long minutes before adding a single gray dot. Karen painted bottles and pills, covering them with waves of blue, tears rendered in acrylic. James sketched 2 hands reaching toward each other, almost touching. Florina moved among them quietly, her presence steady, grounding. She asked simple, open questions. Tell me about this color. What does this shape mean to you? She offered validation, not interpretation. Black is all I see now, Sarah whispered. Florina replied softly, then that's what we paint. We honor it. An hour passed. Miguel stopped abruptly, staring at his jagged lines. This is the first time I've seen it outside my head, he murmured. Denise added a door to her cage. Sarah painted a tiny white in the corner of her black canvas, a star. The room filled with quiet concentration, a mixture of tears and soft breathing, the unspoken realization that this was a safe place, a container for their truths. When the session ended, the circle remained seated, exhausted but lighter. Robert spoke for the first time. "Thank you for not trying to fix us." Florina's eyes filled with unshed tears. "We're not here to be fixed. We're here to be witnessed." Later, she exited the studio to find Brandon leaning against the hall wall, watching. "You were incredible in there," he said. "I didn't do anything," she said, shaking her head. "Exactly," he said with a faint smile. "You let them do the work. That's the hardest thing." They walked through the garden as the sunset painted the sky orange and gold, their pace unspoken yet perfectly aligned. Comfortable silence wrapped around them like a shared secret. Neither mentioned how instinctively their rhythms had synchronized. Florina broke the quiet. "Can I ask you something? About your wife?" Brandon tensed but nodded. "What was her name?" "Melissa," he said after a pause. "She was a nurse. Met her when she treated my father before he died. She was 8 months pregnant when the accident happened. Drunk driver. Both gone instantly." Without thinking, Florina reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry." He didn't pull away. "For a long time, I thought I died too. Just kept breathing out of habit." "What changed?" she whispered. "I realized Melissa would hate what I'd become. She always said pain is meant to be transformed, not worshipped." They had stopped walking. Hands joined, they stood close, a tremor of vulnerability running through them. "Florina, Brandon began, but his phone rang, an emergency at the center, breaking the fragile intimacy. The moment remained, charged and unfinished. Over the following weeks, routine developed. Morning coffees, evening garden walks, late-night talks in the art studio. Inside jokes emerged, laughter echoing through hallways once filled only with quiet apprehension. Brandon taught Florina chess, and she beat him by the third game. She made him laugh until water spilled from his nose. He found her crying in the studio and held her without questions. She noticed he suffered nightmares and left tea outside his office in silent care. Touch became increasingly natural, hands brushing shoulders, fingers lingering, sitting close. Clara pulled Florina aside one afternoon. "You know he hasn't let anyone in since Melissa died?" We're just friends," Florina said quickly. Clara smiled knowingly. "Honey, friends don't look at each other like y'all do." The program flourished. Art therapy became the center's most requested offering. 6 participants became 12, then 20. A waiting list developed. Local media wanted a story. The board took notice. Florina, once hesitant, realized she was guiding others through storms similar to those she had survived. Florina had come to the Mitchell Center broken and ready to give up. 3 months later, she was teaching others how to survive their own storms. But what she didn't know was that the biggest test was coming. Because just when you start to believe in happiness again, life has a way of asking, "Do you really trust this? Or are you still waiting for it to be taken away?" Through the glass of the conference room, Florina paused, frozen mid-step. Brandon sat at the long mahogany table, hands pressed flat against the polished surface. Board members gestured toward charts and slides, their voices polite but insistent. Brandon shook his head subtly, but their persistence never wavered. His jaw was tight, shoulders rigid, something she hadn't seen before. Normally calm, measured, unshakable Brandon now looked uneasy. Minutes later he emerged, briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the hall. When he spotted her, he forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah, just bored stuff. We'll talk later." Her stomach knotted. Evasion, the familiar tightness of betrayal, pressed against her ribs. Memories of Marcus flooded back, empty promises, silences that cut deeper than words. She shook it off, telling herself to breathe, but the unease clung like smoke. Evening found her in their usual spot, a bench tucked beneath the lavender-scented rooftop garden. Brandon appeared quietly and sat beside her without speaking. The city stretched below, muted in the twilight, but Florina's heart thundered in anticipation. Finally, he broke the silence. "The board wants to expand. Open a second center in Austin." Her lips curved into a smile, tentative and hopeful. "That's amazing. Your dream." "They want me to oversee it personally," he continued. "You'd need to relocate for at least 6 months." Her smile faltered, dying under the weight of his words. A physical ache hit her chest. Breath caught in her throat. "When?" she whispered. 3 weeks. Silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, every unspoken feeling, the shared laughter, the lingering touches, the glances that spoke volumes, rose to the surface, demanding attention. Florina pushed herself off the bench. She needed space, distance from the surge of emotion threatening to spill over. "You should go. It's a great opportunity," she said too brightly, too controlled. Brandon's eyes searched hers, piercing through the armor. "Florina, what about the program here?" she asked, deflecting. Avoiding him. Avoiding the truth she couldn't name. "I want you to run it. Full-time position." "Art director," he said finally, voice low but unwavering. "You've built something incredible. This place needs you." Her heart stuttered. She heard not just the words, but the unspoken truth. "I need you." The admission terrified her. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice breaking. "Why not?" "You're perfect for it." "Because—" She stopped, the words she most wanted to say lodged in her throat. "Because I'm falling for you, and you're leaving. Because everyone I trust leaves. Because I'm scared to need someone again." She swallowed hard. The following 3 weeks were a blur. Time accelerated, measured in fleeting touches and stolen glances. Every interaction was hypercharged, every conversation layered with the tension of impending goodbye. Brandon helped her plan curriculum. Their hands brushed over papers, lingering too long. She found him packing his office and nearly broke down, the reality sinking in with every taped box and folder. Late nights in the studio became a sanctuary. They talked until 3 a.m., discussing everything except what mattered most. His hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Instinctively, she covered it with hers. Both knew the significance. Neither spoke. The program participants noticed the shift. Sarah approached softly. "You look sad today." Florina forced a smile. "Just tired." Miguel, direct as ever, asked, "Is Mr. Mitchell leaving?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. New center in Austin." Denise leaned in gently. "Do you love him?" Florina's silence answered before words could form. The night before his departure, Florina worked feverishly on a painting. The canvas captured 2 figures standing back to back in a storm, their forms weathered but resilient. Between them, they had created a shared shelter from rain and wind, a quiet fortress against the chaos around them. It was the most honest thing she had ever painted. Morning arrived too soon. Staff gathered in the lobby, exchanging warm goodbyes and teary hugs. Brandon remained professional, composed, yet his eyes constantly sought hers. She asked for a private moment, leading him to the art studio. She unveiled the painting, carefully wrapped in cloth. "This is for you," she said softly. "So you remember that what you built here saved more than just me." He stared at it, jaw tight, silent for a long, loaded moment. "Florina, you don't have to say anything." She cut him off, protectively. "I know what this is. You saved me, helped me heal, and gave me purpose. That's enough." Brandon's voice cracked slightly. "What if it's not? What if I don't want it to be enough?" He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel his breath, the warmth, the tension, the yearning. "What if leaving is the hardest thing I've ever done?" She stepped back instinctively, protecting her still healing heart. "Then, come back." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And we'll see who we are when we're not just two broken people learning to stand." He reached for her face, thumb brushing her cheek in a tentative, charged gesture. Inches apart, time seemed suspended. And then he dropped his hand. "Take care of yourself, Florina." "You too." Florina watched from the window as his car disappeared down the driveway, tail lights swallowed by mist. Staff dispersed, leaving her alone. She remained, standing until the last speck of red vanished. Something inside her ached, yes, but differently than before. Not broken. Growing. Florina had learned that heartbreak comes in different flavors. The betrayal that shatters you, and the goodbye that changes you. Marcus broke her by leaving. Brandon was breaking her by doing what was right. And somehow that hurt worse. Because this time, she understood that loving someone meant wanting their dreams more than your own comfort. Even when it tore you apart. 4 months. That's how long he'd be gone. 4 months to figure out if what they felt was real, or just two wounded souls mistaking shared pain for love. 4 months for her to decide. Was she brave enough to risk her heart again? Or would she do what she'd always done, protect herself and call it wisdom? The Mitchell Center felt emptier than ever. The laughter that once filled its halls now seemed muted, replaced by a quiet that pressed against Florina's ribs like a weight she couldn't shake. Brandon's absence hung in the air, invisible but tangible in every corner. The coffee machine, where he had perfected her morning cup. The chessboard, left untouched since he had packed for Austin. The bench in the garden, empty, as if holding its breath for his return. Florina threw herself into her work with fervor. She expanded art therapy to 3 sessions daily, trained 2 new instructors, and scheduled herself from dawn until well past dusk. She stayed busy to avoid the ache inside, a strategy she knew all too well. At night, she stood by the window, gazing at the gardens they had planted together, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee that tasted wrong without him. Each corner of the center reminded her of him, and each reminder made her chest tighten. Physically, her body betrayed her mind. She barely ate, and when she did, Clara would silently leave plates by her studio door. Florina painted obsessively, canvas after canvas, pouring all the words she couldn't speak into color and form. Figures appeared in pairs, always close but always separated. Hands reached toward each other and missed. Shadows leaned against shadows. Distance had become her brushstroke. The first call came the second week. Her phone rang in the middle of paperwork, and her heart leapt violently, then calmed in practiced control. "Hey, how's Austin?" she asked, voice steady. "Good. Hot. Different. How's the program?" "Great. Expanded to 3 sessions," she replied, careful, even. The conversation remained polite, surface level. Everything they didn't say roared louder than any words could. When the call ended, Florina felt the silence in her apartment even more acutely, heavier than before. By week 3, her art therapy group had begun noticing. Sarah held a brush hesitantly, a half-finished painting of 2 stars, far apart. "What are you painting, Sarah?" Florina asked. "My husband and me," Sarah whispered. "Even in death, there's still connection." She looked at Florina meaningfully. "Distance doesn't erase love. It just tests it." Miguel, blunt as always, leaned against the doorway. "You're painting him, aren't you? In every canvas." Florina turned, facing her own work. Figures always in pairs, reaching, missing, and almost touching. She couldn't deny it. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted. "Maybe you're not supposed to," Robert said softly. "Maybe that's how you know it's real." 3 months in, Clara found her in the studio late one night. The room was a cathedral of longing. Canvases stacked against the walls, colors shouting the distance between them. Clara sat without speaking for a moment, finally breaking the silence. "He's protecting you, you know," Clara said quietly. "From what?" Florina asked, tired, paint smeared across her fingers. "From himself. From the fear of losing someone he loves again." Florina's eyes filled. "Then he's already lost. You can't love without risk." Clara's voice softened. "I was married once. He died young. Cancer. 4 years, I wouldn't date. Too scared. Then I realized, living scared isn't living at all. Brandon lost Melissa and their baby. That kind of loss. It rewires you. He's not afraid of loving you. He's afraid of surviving losing you." Florina absorbed the words, heart pounding. "So, what do I do?" "You decide if he's worth the wait. And if you're brave enough to tell him the truth." "What truth?" "That you love him, even if it terrifies you." That night, she started a new canvas. Gone were the figures back to back, the missed connections. Now, 2 people faced each other across the void, hands stretching to bridge the gap, choices visible in every brushstroke. It was the most vulnerable thing she had ever painted. Later, she sat with journal in lap, writing what she couldn't speak aloud. Pages poured out. Fear, hope, love, terror. "I thought Marcus broke me. But he just broke a version of me that needed breaking. You didn't fix me. You witnessed me becoming whole. And somewhere in that witnessing, I fell in love with you." She folded the letter, tucked it away. Not for sending, just to name it, to claim it. Sunday evening brought their weekly call. Brandon's voice was polite, but tiredness and loneliness seeped through. "You okay?" she asked instinctively. Long pause. "Austin's great. The center's thriving." Another pause. "But it's not home." "Where's home?" Her heart pounded. Even longer pause. "I think you know." And then he hung up before she could respond. Florina sat with the phone in her hand, realization sinking in. She had been waiting for him to make the first move, waiting to be chosen, like she had with Marcus. But love wasn't about being chosen, it was about choosing. And maybe, finally, it was her turn to be brave. 3 months apart had taught them both the same lesson. Running from love doesn't protect you from loss. It just guarantees you'll lose the thing you were too afraid to hold. The question was, who would be brave enough to say it first? Who would risk everything for a maybe? Tuesday morning arrived with the faintest promise of spring. The Mitchell Center gardens were beginning to bloom, tender shoots of green and bursts of pale color, tentative yet hopeful. Florina moved through the art studio, guiding the group through their morning session. The theme, hope. Soft brushstrokes, hesitant hands, colors daring to reach across blank spaces. Then the noise came. Raised voices from the lobby, sharp and urgent. Heads lifted. Paintbrushes hovered. Clara burst through the door, breathless. Florina. He's here. She didn't have to ask who. Her heart hammering in her chest, a paintbrush clattered to the floor. Now, she whispered, barely audible. Clara's grin was all the answer she needed. Miguel leaned back, arms crossed, voice teasing but certain. Go. We've got this. Sarah, wiping tears from her own eyes, added, Don't you dare make that man wait. Time slowed as Florina walked toward the lobby. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her hands shook, paint smeared on her apron. She was suddenly aware of messy hair, worn clothes, and a twinge of self-consciousness, but none of it mattered. She kept walking, and then she saw him. Brandon stood by the reception desk, thinner than before, the edges of exhaustion visible beneath his sharp gray eyes. He spoke quietly with the staff, yet the moment he turned and saw her, the world contracted. The bustling lobby, the murmurs of patience, the scent of fresh paint, all of it faded. He walked toward her, each step purposeful, deliberate. Gray eyes she had painted in countless canvases met hers, alive and real. Exhaustion lined his face, but determination shone through. In that instant, she didn't just see him. She felt him, standing there, existing, and choosing to return. The Austin Center is running. His voice was rough, hoarse from travel and sleepless nights. I have good people there. They don't need me anymore. Her throat tightened. And here. He closed the space between them in 4 strides. Here. I hope I'm still needed. Florina's lips trembled as she whispered. By the center? Her breath caught. Then, barely audible, by you. The lobby fell silent. Everyone watched. Florina didn't care. Brandon's voice, low and urgent, cut through the stillness. I spent 4 months convincing myself I could live without you. That what we had was just 2 damaged people clinging to each other. But Florina, you're not my lifeline. You're my life. The reason I wake up believing the future can be better than the past. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Months of holding back broke open in a flood of emotion. I'm scared, she admitted, voice cracking. My husband promised forever and gave me heartbreak. How do I trust again? Brandon reached for her hands, holding them gently. One day at a time, he murmured, echoing words he had whispered in her studio months ago. Let me earn it. Let me show you that not all men are your ex-husband. That some of us stay. Her fingers tightened around his. A fragile hope bloomed inside her chest. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Her breath caught. He unwrapped it carefully. Her old wedding ring, the one she had thrown away in that rain-soaked night. I found it in your things, he said softly. That first night. I'm not asking you to wear this, his voice gentle but firm. I'm asking you to let me replace it. Someday. When you're ready. With something that means beginning, not ending. Florina stared at the ring, the symbol of her worst betrayal, then at the man who had refused to let her drown. I don't want that ring, she said firmly, seeing the brief flash of disappointment in his eyes. She hurried to explain. Because it never represented me. It represented who someone else wanted me to be. Small, convenient, quiet. If there's going to be a ring, Brandon, her voice broke, tears streaming freely, it needs to be something new. Something that represents who I became after the storm. Stronger, wiser, whole, and us. His hope flickered in those gray eyes. What about us? Florina took a deep breath. Every lesson in courage, every painstaking moment of growth, converged in this instant. We take it slow. We do this right. No rushing. No dramatic declarations. We build something real. A radiant smile broke across his face, the smile she had longed for all these months. I can do slow. I've waited my whole life for you, Florina Hayes. I can wait a little longer to do this right. And then, finally, it happened. The kiss was anything but slow. Desperate, tender, grief and joy colliding, months of longing compressed into a single moment. It tasted of tears and coffee, of coming home. They broke apart just enough to breathe, and the lobby erupted. Staff cheered, cried, and clapped. Patients peeked through studio doors. Sarah dabbed her eyes, Miguel gave a thumbs up, and Clara glowed, practically radiating. I told you so. Brandon rested his forehead against hers. Their breaths were ragged, hearts finally in sync. I missed you, he whispered, voice breaking. I missed you too, she replied, matching him, voice trembling. When did you get here? She asked softly. Drove through the night. Couldn't wait for a flight. Brandon. I know, he cut in, grinning. We're taking it slow. Starting tomorrow. They say you can't start a relationship from trauma. That you need to heal first, separately, completely. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe some people heal best when they're witnessed. When someone says, I see your broken pieces, and I'm not afraid. Maybe the strongest love isn't built on perfection. It's built on two people brave enough to say, I'm still healing. But I choose you anyway. The next morning, the Mitchell Center was alive with quiet energy. Staff had gathered for the weekly meeting, unaware that the air itself carried a hint of something new. Brandon stood at the head of the room, confident and calm. I'm back, he announced. Permanently. A ripple passed through the room. Heads turned, surprised but curious. The Austin Center has a strong leadership team, he continued. They don't need me to be there. My place is here, personally and professionally. His gaze lingered on Florina when he said personally. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Around them, the staff exchanged knowing glances, silent but approving. Morning coffee became a shared ritual. Together now, openly. Brandon sat in on her art therapy sessions, notebook in hand, asking thoughtful questions. Patients responded to his presence, curious, receptive, and encouraged. Sarah commented one afternoon, smiling warmly, It's nice seeing you happy, Mr. Mitchell. He looked at Florina then, eyes soft. It's nice being happy, he said. Everything was slow and intentional. They weren't rushing into labels, but they were building something solid. Dinners in the garden, long walks in the budding spring air, sharing stories, some light, some painfully raw. Her marriage, his grief, each learning the other's triggers, fears, hopes. Each moment of vulnerability strengthened their connection. By the second week, Brandon asked her properly, Would you have dinner with me? Away from here. Downtown Chicago. A proper first date in over a decade. Clara helped Florina pick her outfit. She emerged in a simple, elegant dress, heart pounding. Brandon waited in the lobby, suit impeccable. "You look beautiful," he said, genuine. "And you clean up nice yourself." She shook, smiling nervously, unsure if she could breathe. The restaurant was Italian, tucked in a quiet corner. Candlelight flickered across the table, wine glasses catching reflections of nervous laughter. Conversation flowed like it always had, yet charged with a new possibility. He reached across for her hand. She let him take it, tracing his palm with her thumb. "This okay?" he asked. "More than okay," she breathed. Vulnerability came next. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this anymore." "Do what?" he prompted gently. "Let someone in, trust someone with me." He squeezed her hand. "I'm scared too. Scared of losing you. Scared I'm not enough." Fierce certainty in his eyes. "You're enough." "So are you," she whispered. A month later, a text arrived from Simone. "I heard you're doing well. Can we talk?" Florina's hands shook as she showed Brandon. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. That afternoon, distracted during her art therapy session, Miguel noticed. "Something's wrong," he said. She told the group about the message. Discussion unfolded around forgiveness, closure, moving forward. Denise reminded her, "You don't owe her anything." Sarah added, "But maybe you owe yourself peace." Florina decided to meet Simone at a public coffee shop. Brandon offered to come, wait nearby. "You don't have to do this alone." She shook her head. "I know, but I think I need to." He kissed her forehead. "Call me if you need me. I'll come." The meeting was tense at first. Simone arrived, guilt written across her face. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. Florina remained silent. Finally, Simone confessed. "Marcus and I aren't together. He cheated with someone from his office. Karma, right?" Florina felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. Just empty space where resentment once lived. "I'm so sorry," Simone continued. "For everything. I was selfish, cruel. I destroyed our friendship." Florina raised a hand. "You're right. Sorry doesn't fix anything." For months, I imagined this moment, everything I'd say, how I'd make you feel small. But now I just feel tired. Tired of carrying this. "I forgive you," she said softly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. But we're not friends. We won't be. You taught me something, though. I settle for less than I deserve. I won't make that mistake again." Tears streamed down Simone's face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No, you don't. But I deserve to let this go." Florina left, leaving money for coffee. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "I already found what I need." Outside, she called Brandon. "How'd it go?" "I'm free." Her voice broke with relief. "Come home. I'll be waiting." Home. The words settled warmly in her chest. The Mitchell Center had become more than a workplace. It was home. Months passed. Spring turned to summer. Their relationship deepened, still slow, still intentional. One evening, in the garden, Brandon said it first. Quietly, reverently, "I love you." She said it back, laughing softly. "I love you too. I think I have for a while." He met her world and she met his. Board meetings, donors, supporters, introductions to medical professionals. "Florina Hayes," he said proudly, "art director and the heart of this place." A video call introduced him to her father in Atlanta, initially skeptical, protective. Brandon's sincerity and devotion won him over. Her father pulled him aside. "You hurt her, I don't care how rich you are." Brandon met his gaze. "Sir, hurting her would be like hurting myself." A nod. Approval earned. 6 months in, Brandon knew without doubt. She was the one. He designed a ring, custom, sapphire like storm clouds, diamonds like raindrops, a symbol of the night they first met. Early spring, a year after his return, the first rain fell. Florina stood in the garden, face lifted to the sky, smiling without fear. Brandon approached, kneeling in the mud, rain soaking him. "Florina Hayes," he called gently. She turned, gasping, hands over her mouth. "You thought you were broken." "I saw someone extraordinary," he said. Rain streamed down both their faces. He opened the box. "You've taught me healing isn't linear. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. I choose you, Florina. Every day, every way. Will you choose me back? Will you marry me?" Crying, laughing, and nodding. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. Perfect fit. He lifted her, spinning, laughing, kissing her with rain and joy mingling. Through the windows, staff and patients watched, cheering and crying. Miguel filmed on his phone. Sarah dabbed her eyes. Clara whispered, "Finally!" The whole center celebrated quietly with them. That night, dry and warm by the fire, her head rested on his shoulder. She gazed at the ring in firelight. "Storm cloud blue," she murmured, "to remember where we started." He kissed her hair. "And the rain that brought us together." Some love stories begin in sunshine. Theirs began in a storm. Maybe that's why it was strong enough to last. They'd both already survived the worst. Everything after was just choosing each other. Again and again. In rain and shine. In healing and growing. In becoming more together than they'd ever been apart. The Mitchell Renewal Center in Austin, Texas gleamed under a sky heavy with clouds, promising rain. Guests murmured nervously as they watched the darkened horizon. Florina and Brandon stood together, exchanging a glance. "Rain would be fitting," she murmured. He kissed her temple. "Perfect, actually." The building was modern, glass and light everywhere, yet it radiated the warmth of the Chicago Center. Gardens bloomed, lavender filling the air. The fountain in the center murmured softly, water dancing in rhythm. Patients, already in residence, looked hopeful, eager, and alive. As the crowd gathered for the ribbon cutting, Brandon stepped to the podium, Florina beside him. His hand found hers, grounding both of them. 3 years ago, I built the first Mitchell Center from grief, he began. Trying to transform loss into something meaningful. I thought I understood healing then. I didn't. Not really. He paused, looking at her. This woman beside me taught me what healing actually is. It's not about forgetting pain or moving past it. It's about integration, transformation, taking the broken pieces and creating something new. Florina's eyes glistened with tears. He pulled the curtain from a sign, the Sarah Hayes Creative Healing Studio. Florina gasped. Her mother's name, a tribute, a legacy. The studio dedicated to art therapy, to creative healing, her dream now alive. Florina stepped forward to speak. Her voice shook but was strong. 18 months ago, I stood in the rain, wanting to disappear. I'd lost everything. Marriage, best friend, sense of self. I thought my life was over. She looked out at the patients. This man found me and refused to let me drown. But he didn't save me. He witnessed me saving myself. That's what we do here. We witness each other. We say, your pain is real, your healing is possible, and you are not alone. My mother used to say, baby girl, the storm doesn't last forever. But the person you become in the storm, she's eternal. This space is for everyone still in their storm. We see you. We're with you. And we're not going anywhere. The crowd rose, applause rolling like thunder. Patients cried, embraced. Staff cheered. Rain began to fall, gentle, a blessing. No one ran. They stood in it, celebrating. Florina led a small group through the studio. Natural light spilled across tables laden with supplies. Walls were alive with patient artwork, each piece a testament to survival. Maya, a young woman recently divorced, stepped forward. I read about your story online. It gave me hope. Florina held her hands. You're going to make it. I promise. Maya's eyes filled. How do you know? Florina smiled. Because you're here. Showing up, that's the hardest part. David, a veteran with haunted eyes, presented a sketch, dark and violent. It's perfect, Florina said. Really? He asked. Really. Truth is always perfect, even when it's ugly. An impromptu session formed around her. She pulled out supplies, demonstrating. Paint what you can't say. Don't edit. Just exist on the canvas. She offered quiet guidance, letting each patient discover their voice. Brandon watched from the doorway, like old times, now with a ring glinting on his finger. Clara leaned in. You found a good one. Brandon smiled. I found the best one. She found you too, you know. Best thing that ever happened to me was finding her in that rain. After the ceremony, they walked the gardens as the sun set. Rain stopped, and air clean and fragrant. Their footsteps matched. Easy. Can you believe we're here? Florina whispered. Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up, and it'll be that night again, standing in rain with divorce papers. Brandon stopped, turning her to face him. Would you do it differently? If you could. The pain. The betrayal. No one would choose that. But it brought me here. To this. To you. Every broken piece led me home. He confessed softly, I used to hate the drunk driver who killed Melissa. Imagined revenge for years. But lately, if that night hadn't happened, I wouldn't have built the center. Wouldn't have been there to find you. Shared understanding settled between them. We can't rewrite our tragedies, she said. But we can choose what we build from them, he replied. We can honor what we lost by how we live. Foreheads touching, she whispered. I love you. I love you too. Always, he answered. Night fell. Garden lights glowed as they sat on a bench by the fountain, their Chicago spot now reborn in Austin. Florina held up her hand. The ring caught the last light, storm cloud blue with diamonds like raindrops. Perfect metaphor, she said. For what? For us. Beauty from chaos. Light from darkness. Rain that brings life instead of destroying it. What's next for us? She asked. He pulled her close. More centers. More programs. Maybe a family. Her eyes widened. You'd want that. I lost a child once. terrified to try again. But with you, I want everything, every future, every possibility. If you want it too. Her tears fell. I want it. All of it. Scared. But I want it. Then we take it one day at a time, he said. Like everything else. No rushing. Just living. Building something real, she whispered. They kissed, gentle and sure, the future stretching before them, endless possibility. Someone once asked me, "What do you do when life breaks you?" I used to think the answer was, hide. Protect yourself. Never trust again. But I learned something different. You do what rain does after it falls. You seep into the earth and help things grow. You don't run from storms. You learn to dance in them. And if you're lucky, you find someone to dance with. Someone who sees your broken pieces and says, "These are beautiful too." Healing isn't becoming unbroken. It's accepting the cracks as where the light gets in. Sometimes that light looks like a stranger's hand in the rain. Sometimes it looks like love you never knew you deserved. Sometimes it looks like a future you thought you'd lost. 1 year after the Austin opening, back at the Chicago Center, Florina led a workshop. Walls displayed patients' journeys, before and after, pain transformed into art. Her program now spanned 5 cities, touching hundreds. Brandon entered, lunch in hand, kissing her cheek. Her hand rested on her belly. They were expecting a daughter, Melissa, honoring both mothers lost. They stood in the garden, hands intertwined over her belly, rain falling softly. Neither ran. Both smiled. Home. Florina Hayes collapsed in the rain, clutching divorce papers and a broken heart. Brandon Mitchell found her and offered more than rescue. He offered partnership in rebuilding. Together, they proved that the worst night of your life can become the doorway to everything you never knew you needed. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without pain. Love doesn't fix you. It witnesses you becoming whole. And sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings emerge from the darkest storms. Rain doesn't destroy. It makes room for new growth. Sometimes we don't need saving. We need someone to remind us we're worth saving. And sometimes, that someone becomes the love we never saw coming. Have you ever had someone appear in your darkest moment and change everything? Someone who saw you at your lowest and stayed anyway? Share your story in the comments. Your words could be exactly what someone else needs tonight. And if this story touched your heart, hit subscribe for more tales of love, loss, healing, and hope. Everyone deserves a story where the rain stops, the sun breaks through, and a second chance at happiness becomes real. Your storm doesn't define you. How you rise from it does.